we're really excited about our program today. We have two of Edmonton's foremost leaders here to talk to us about reconciliation. I'm just so, Louis, don't look around like we're not talking about you. I said foremost leaders, and he's like looking like, that'd be you I'm talking about. And Cheryl Whiskeyjack, too, who also needs very little introduction. But please, I do want to take a minute to introduce both of them. And I think, Cheryl, you're going to speak first. Sure, and then Louis, and they're both available to stay for questions after their presentations to us, so thank you for that. So as many of you know, Cheryl Whiskeyjack is the Executive Director of the Bent Arrow Traditional Healing Society. She identifies as an Indigenous settler who has been living, working, and playing in Treaty 6 since 1979. And I love the reference to playing because anybody who follows her on social media knows all about the most amazing media star that she has in her life, and that is George Bailey, who is the most incredible beagle, the cutest beagle I've ever seen in my life. And so she does play lots. And he's actually famous. He was on TV during a winter snowstorm, I think so. But anyway, she did all that in Treaty 6 since 1979 when her family moved from the traditional Anishinaabeg territory in Ontario as a young girl. As Executive Director at Bent Arrow, Cheryl's job is to help urban Aboriginal people live in two worlds at once. The City of Edmonton, with its particular laws and norms, and the Indigenous world of ceremony and beliefs that has existed on this land for millennia. Cheryl proudly serves as a board member of the Canadian Accreditation Council of Human Services and the Alliance Association of Community Services. She has contributed to the work of End Poverty since its inception and currently acts as co-chair of the Stewardship Roundtable. She also sits at the table for the National Advisory Council on Poverty. She acts as a mentor for the Edmonton Chamber of Voluntary Organizations Executive Director Mentorship Program and represents Bent Arrow through an organization she's very proud of, and that's C5, a collaborative partnership of 5 nonprofits using innovative engagement in vulnerable neighborhoods. Cheryl is proud of the strong partnership she has maintained across sectors and believes that ending poverty requires a diversity of voices to ensure better systems and communities for all. She has spent her entire career going above and beyond in her work to help vulnerable populations and to bridge Indigenous and non-Indigenous relationships among a wide variety of community groups and organizations. I've been very privileged over the years, and especially it seems this year, Cheryl, to have worked on a number of files with you that we are currently sitting together on and I, as I mentioned earlier, currently sitting together on the Governance Committee for the Healthy Streets Outreach Center. Cheryl has been honored with many, many things, but the ones that really stick out to me is recently 2 honorary degrees, one from her alma mater right here at Grant MacEwan, and the other from the University of Alberta. She also recently won a Rotary Integrity Award, and I'm very proud to work with her very closely on Rotary. She's done an awful lot for the Rotary Indigenous partnership that we build, and we've always appreciated you for that. And I'm incredibly proud to call her a friend. Next, I'm going to introduce Louis, who again needs no introduction by anybody. And you are a community leader, so just keep looking at me here. That's good. Louis is a communicator and educator. He has dedicated his life's work to creating and maintaining connections and relationships that cross cultural divides. His long track record of public service includes board member of Theatre Network, board member of the Edmonton Interfaith Network for Action and Education, and I think in relation to that work, you're going to be going to Chicago very soon. Vice chair for the North American Interfaith Network Council, vice chair of the Documentary Organization of Canada Alberta Chapter, chair of the Global Indigenous Dialogue, and trustee of the Council for a Parliament of World Religions, to mention just a few. He has so much spare time, this guy. Louis has received the Queen's Jubilee Diamond Jubilee Medal and her Platinum Jubilee Medal, which is kind of special because it's the last one that she gave out, so good for you. The Inspired Award for Public Service, the Province of Alberta Centennial Medal for his work in human rights and diversity, the Distinguished Alumni Graduate from Grant MacEwan. We should have all gone to Grant MacEwan. You guys get good awards. Although the best university is still the University of Saskatchewan. Sorry, Andrew. Sorry, Jared. Was that a career-limiting move? Louis is a Woodland Cree from the Sucker Creek First Nations in northern Alberta. His consulting company, Cardinal Strategic Communications, specializes in Indigenous education and communications project development. He is also owner and CEO of the Red Earth Blue Sky Productions, a multimedia and entertainment production company. Currently, Lewis is a project manager for Kichiwa-Aski, not so good, Sacred Land in the city of Edmonton, the first ever dedicated Indigenous ceremonies land in Canada, and he's invited us to visit it very soon, both Linda for Rotary and for Team Reach. But I think you can see I'm going to be leaving you in very excellent hands. What I've learned from both of these two distinguished individuals is their strong commitment to reconciliation, to walking in two worlds. Cheryl has taught me that, Lewis has taught me that, and we're just absolutely delighted that you could be here to spend time with us. So Cheryl, you can come first.
Thing's gonna go like, I have to keep my finger on it so it doesn't go to bed. I asked our admin to print off my words, and for some reason only half of them printed, so I hate looking at a screen, but that's what I have to do. I am a storyteller. I love telling stories. I don't like to read off of paper or a screen, but I'm gonna start reading off of my screen because it's not my story. So I don't want to get it wrong. But what I wanted to share with you in the time that I have is a story that I think can teach us a lot. And it's from a social media post I saw on my Facebook. So I have Facebook for my friends and family, and Twitter, I get to talk to the world, right? And I sort of like manage both accordingly. So I'll just read you the post. I bought a bird feeder. I hung it on my tree and I filled it with seed. What a beauty of a bird feeder it was, I thought, as I filled it lovingly. Within a week, we had hundreds of birds taking advantage of the continuous flow of free and easily accessible food. But then the birds started building nests on the boards of the patio, above the table, and next to the barbecue. And then, I'm sorry for saying this, but then came the shit. It was everywhere, on the patio, on the tile, on the chairs, on the table, everywhere. Then some of the birds turned mean. They would dive bomb me, try to peck me, even though I had fed them out of my own pocket. And all the other birds were boisterous and loud all day and into the evening. They sat on the feeder and squawked and screamed all day long. And then they demanded that I fill the feeders when they got low on food. After a while, I couldn't even sit on my own back porch. So I took down the feeder, and in 3 days, the birds were gone. I cleaned up their mess, and I took down the many nests that they had built all over the patio. Soon the backyard was as it used to be, quiet and serene, and no one demanding rights to a free meal. So the post went on to say, now let's see. The government is like a bird feeder. Our government gives out free food, subsidized housing, free medical care, free education, and allows anyone born here the right to be a citizen automatically. Then illegals came by tens of thousands. So remember, this is a social media post. This isn't me talking. Suddenly our taxes went up to pay for free services. Small apartments were housing 5 families. You have to wait 15 hours to be seen by an ER doc. Your child's second grade teacher is behind the other schools because half the kids don't even speak English. Cornflakes come in a bilingual box. I have to press 1 to hear my bank talk to me in English. People waving flags other than ours. And sadly, we know they're waving our flag too now. Are squawking and screaming in the streets, demanding more rights and free liberties. Just my opinion, but maybe it's time for the government to take down the bird feeder. It's pretty provocative, hey? So they then invited the reader. If you agree, pass it on. If not, just keep cleaning up the shit. And so whoever shared this, obviously something in there resonated for them, right? Because when I saw this social media post, it was a person that if you met her, you would like her. You know, she wasn't a hateful person, but she shared it for a reason. There was something in there that resonated with her. Maybe she waited a long time to get in to see her doctor, or I don't know, something in there made her want to push share. So whatever it was that made her do that, it doesn't represent her ideology, values, or principles. But this is where we find ourselves today. So now I have rules for my posts, and you know, apparently they're entertaining. But the rule I have is I have a dad that I really, really look up to. He really set the bar high for me, an incredible role model for me. So my rule is, if he can see what I post, then I can post it. And if he can't see it, I won't post it, because I don't want to disappoint him. So he places a high value on goodness, kindness, and sharing. So then I thought, okay, I can't share this. You know, people are going to see this in my feed because she shared it. So I had to fix it. Thank you. So here's how I fixed it. So it wasn't my story, but if it was, I added, just my opinion. But maybe it's time to put out more bird feeders. So all the birds have enough. I love birds, even enough to put up with their shit. Because I realize that my home sits in their traditional territory. Their trees and sources of food were chopped down and bulldozed so that I could have a home, a back deck to sit on, to enjoy the same breeze that lifts them in flight, to enjoy the sun that shines for us all. I'm wise enough to know that when all God's creatures have enough, we will settle into a life of balance. So this is what I added to the post. My dad, my grandparents, aunties, uncles, and ancestors gave me those teachings. So I feed the birds, and I think I'll even put up some birdhouses. And I did. I think during COVID, I kept putting up videos of all the birds who were coming to visit my bird feeders. So there's so much to unpack here. Anyone who hears this can hear a little of their story in it. The takeaway of the first story is very divisive. And then the second, it's very connected, right? Reconciliation, land back, newcomers, missing and murdered, Black Lives Matter, lockdowns, pipelines, idle no more, unmarked graves, vaccines, left, right, rural, urban. All can be vehicles for divisiveness and noise, or they can be an invitation to learn. We are left with three choices: to refute, to explore, or to say nothing. To say nothing is the easiest, but it leaves both sides stuck in the same place. Refuting can be harder, but it too leaves people stuck in the same place because you're planted on your side, right? Exploring is tough, toughest by far, but the likelihood of reaching a place of understanding, compromise, and some movement, and therefore change, the likelihood is better. This is the spirit I try to bring into every conversation in my work, an invitation to explore. When I heard that years ago, the youth we were serving were being harassed by Edmonton police members after hours when they weren't in program with us, I extended an invitation to explore why. How can we achieve community safety and support marginalized youth? Because I think you can do both. When I found out from a fellow newcomer serving agency that newcomers to Canada often have a negative impression of Indigenous folks, we discussed and decided to gift them with a positive impression the day they arrived. And so on and so forth. So this is my invitation to everyone in the room. The story of the social media post is symbolic. We are the government. We are the government. The bird seed represents our social programs. We are the government, all of us in this room. as demonstrated by the process we just went through like 10 days ago. We are the government. We decided. My last example of all those words that you hear in the news was of rural and urban. Some will say that that's what decided the election. A quick look at any political map can clearly show that. But remember what I said. The people are the government. We are the people. I refuse to believe that our fellow Albertans are against us, because we are all Albertans. So this is my story now. My sister broke her arm. Oh, we have bad luck. Every time I go on a vacation with her, there is drama. Usually involves a hospital visit, and it's not me, it's her. But she broke her arm hiking in Canmore this spring when she went on a hike all by herself. So I found us both at the Canmore ER department. And they still have very strict COVID procedures there, so I had to sit in the waiting room with my mask on while she was in the treatment rooms, you know, getting looked at. So I love people watching, and you know, if they're loud enough, I love people listening. So there were two. It's my affectionate word. It's not meant to be derogatory, but I call my dad this geezers, like those old guys, right? I call my dad a geezer. So there was two old geezers across the waiting room from me, and they were loudly complaining about how Trudeau is ruining this country. And so I'm sitting there smiling underneath my mask, and I took to Twitter. And I said, I'm just sitting here in the Canmore ER, listening to these two old geezers complain about how Trudeau is ruining this country, all while enjoying free healthcare. And in my replies, no sooner did I hit tweet, came from a woman who I didn't know. And she said, I swear you're talking about my dad. I didn't panic, because remember my rule, right? I don't tweet mad. So I didn't panic. I just said to her, no sooner did I hit tweet on that last tweet, another lady came out of the treatment rooms in a gown and a piece of paper, and she looked very lost. She's looking around, and that same old man who was complaining about Trudeau says, how can I help you, dear? And she says, I'm looking for the x-ray. I got sent for an x-ray. He gives her the crook of his arm and says, I will escort you there. And I just thought, what a sweet guy, you know? So off they go. And I told her that story about how he did that. And she goes, that's my dad. It's him. And she goes, and he always calls me a lefty, but he taught me everything I know. He taught me how to help. He taught me to be there for my community. You know, he taught me all these really great values, and then he insults me by calling me a lefty. But he literally taught me everything I know. So he's the one who molded her. He taught her the meaning of community and helping your neighbor, and that is who won the election. This is the Alberta I know, and I will never, ever stop encouraging people to explore. So those are the things I wanted to share with you here today. Thank you.
How do I follow that? See, I'm going old school. I got notes on that. Yeah. Anyway, I'm a GIT, a geezer in training. Well, I don't want to give my age away, but I've been around the city for quite a while. So, first of all, though, I want to thank you all for the incredible work that you all do. The incredible changes that you've contributed to or you've created yourself, and the work that helps so many people, and the many hearts and the many spirits that need your help is is greatly appreciated. So thank you for everything that you've done and the selflessness it takes to do this kind of work. I know it well. My First Nation is called Sucker Creek Cree First Nation. And it's a great name for a First Nation, lousy name for a casino. That's why we don't have one. So we're working on it. Anyhow, but I came to this city first in 1970 to live permanently. And I was 9 years old at the time. No, 8. And came from Sucker Creek. And, you know, as kids, you know, nature was our jungle gym. You know, we climbed everywhere. Our favorite sport, amongst many, was climbing trees. We used to love climbing trees. So we'd go and we'd find a tree and go to the very top of it and then have a look around, you know, sit up there for a while. Well, I found out when we first came to the city that doesn't work so well here in the city. On the first weekend that we were here, a part of my tradition, at least when I was a kid, my grandfather taught me, he goes, when you go to a new place, always go around and check it out. You know, walk around, find out where everything is. And so I took that to heart, and so there I was. We were living by St. Joe's High School, and everything was pretty flat, so I couldn't really see very far because the buildings were in the way. So I went and found the tallest tree I could find and climbed it. Went all the way up to the top, and I just got this beautiful view. And I was sitting there for about 15, 20 minutes, I guess, and then suddenly I heard a voice calling out, and it was this woman. And she was telling me to come down, it's not safe up there. And then as soon as she finished doing that, then the police and the fire department arrived. And I was up there. They thought that I was, you know, going to hurt myself or something, but they coaxed me down from the tree. I didn't need any more coaxing. I wanted to go home. So then the police brought me home. And my father was telling me, he goes, you know, you can't do that sort of thing in the city here. You're going to have to figure out a different way and how to live here. And so that was my introduction to the city. And so we've been here since then. My brother Lorne, a famous actor from Corner Gas and all those other things, he and I grew up in the city here, and we've seen the underbelly of the city. We've seen what it's had to offer. The negative, we were homeless for a while when we were teenagers. And so, you know, we saw all kinds of different nasty sorts of things. But we also saw some very beautiful people. People who really cared and wanted to help as they could. And that always left an indelible mark on me, and how much just a helping hand, a kind heart, some good words can really go far in helping someone move through whatever challenges they're moving through. And so that's really something that really left its mark in me. And so I've moved through life with that value in my heart. And the work that I do is always about bridging the two worlds that don't understand each other. In ceremony, when I was given my traditional Cree name, it's Sipigo Gisik, which means blue sky. And the elders instructed me. They said, you know, your life is about building bridges between two worlds that don't understand each other. The bridge exists not just to meet in the middle and shake hands and say hello, but actually to go all the way to the other side and learn as much as you can and bring back what is good, but also invite other people to come to our side and to learn from us and to take with them what is good. So that's really the foundation of the work that I do. And it does sound like a lot, but it's something that I really think is important when we are doing the work that we're doing. That's why I see myself in the work that you're all doing here. And I look forward to continuing that relationship in whatever way we can. Because our country, the world in general, is in a time in history where there is a lot of intolerance, where there is a lot of fear. And the fear is really motivating a lot of negative action. And we see that here. It's not out there, it's here. It's in the house. The call is coming from inside the house. And so we have to recognize that the work that we do must continue, and it's really important work. As was mentioned before, I am the project manager for Kichikawaski, which is sacred land, and that in and of itself is a bold act of reconciliation. And it took a number of years to pull together, to develop, and to build. But it also took the time, as my good friend Jamie Miller, who's the manager of the Indigenous Relations Office, pointed out. She said, you know, that's the speed of relationship. And so, because we had to do a lot of learning as the Indigenous community. Nobody's ever done this kind of thing before, right? So we recognized that we had to reach out and to educate and to learn and to share as much as we could as we started the process of developing this project. And so now it's complete, and we're having a soft launch opening, and the grand opening will be September 23rd, the fall equinox. And so we'll send out invitations, and I hope that you'll all make it there. But what wasn't mentioned is that I'm a history buff and a genealogy nerd. And so that's something that's always really intrigued me, and it's turned me back into what I always seen myself as, a storyteller, much like Cheryl was saying. And so through my production company, I'm developing a project called Carry the Bundle. It's an Indigenous family history of pre and post Canada, based on starting with the Cardinal family, but really it's interlinked with all of the Indigenous families in Canada and even into the United States. So it takes a look at history, but from an Indigenous lens, utilizing the tradition of family ties and family relationships. Because within that is a story that I uncovered, the original story of what Canada is and what Canada was meant to be. And so through that process of doing genealogy, I was able to find out more about my family. One interesting thing a lot of people don't know is that the Cardinal family comes from Spain. The Cardinal family name originates in Spain in 1492. That's when we first, I can trace it back to the 12th century, but anyway. But 1492 specifically, in Spain, they were forced to leave because they wouldn't become Catholics. And then they immigrated into France, and then eventually they became Catholic in France, and then immigrated in 1659 here to New France, which is Montreal at the time. And so through that family, you start to learn more about all these different lineages that you have. And then suddenly the distances between our cultural identities is a lot smaller. And then you start to see a lot of commonalities, a lot of common themes that present themselves. And then you really start to understand the depth of family and what it means. And I think while I was doing this research, speaking with my elders, I came to realize that that story of Canada has yet to be told from that perspective. Because when we started Canada, the story of Canada starts from the name itself, Canada. And Canada comes from the Algonquian/Cree word Kanatan. And Kanatan means a clean, pure, sacred place. Those three are interchangeable: clean, pure, and sacred. That is Kanatan. When you remove the N from Kanatan, it becomes Kanata. And it means to make pure, clean, and sacred. And so Kanata, or Canada, is not a noun, it's a verb. And it reminds us that we have work to do, because Canada is about relationships, particularly when we look at how our treaties were created and why they were created. But Kanata then signals us that here's a new way of seeing our country and what it stands for, and principles and values that we can place into the work that we do and how we see ourselves today. And so Kanata, when you hear "Oh Canada" or you see the flag, there should be a gentle tapping on your shoulder that's asking you, are you keeping your relationships in order? Because in order to achieve kanatan, a clean, pure, sacred place, you have to practice kanata. It's a verb. And so you have to ensure that your relationships are in order. And first, it starts with you. Are you in balance? Are you in harmony with yourself? Are you living a healthy life? And then to your loved ones, are you maintaining those relationships that are around you that matter the most to you? How are you looking after your extended family? How are you looking after your community? How are you looking after your nation? Are you working to bring in that balance and order so that we all can live in peace and in healthiness and in wellness as well? So that within itself tells me that Canada has an inherent spirit and nature to itself that we've forgotten as we moved along the way. But yet, the irony is that it's expressed through the actions and the works of what you are doing here. And this vision, this new way of seeing Canada pulls us closer together. And when we move towards reconciliation, when we do that, because reconciliation is also a verb, and as we're moving forward in this movement that we call Canada or Kanata, the treaties then become very important. For us to understand the nature, the spirit, and intent of the treaties is a way of understanding how we can achieve reconciliation even deeper. Because treaties in many of the indigenous traditions, and we're going right back to the first treaty in 1613, the two-row wampum, made with the Haudenosaunee and the Dutch. Within that wampum belt that represented that treaty, it has a white backdrop. It's about 4 feet wide and maybe about 6 inches thick, and it's a white wampum belt with 2 purple lines that go across it. And those 2 purple lines represent the vessel of the newcomers and the canoe of the indigenous people, and that they will go side by side, sharing the bounty of life, connected with each other through peace, understanding, and respect. Peace, friendship, and respect, I'm sorry. Those 3 elements are the foundation of it. And when they orate the story about it, they say, and we shall be like family, like brothers and sisters. For as long as the sun shines, the grass grows and the river flows. So those statements are found throughout our whole treaty-making processes across Canada. It's reminding us of the way that the original version, the original story of what Canada meant to be. Because treaties were adoption ceremonies. It's where one nation adopts another nation. And you become like family. So I stand with you as your family member during the difficult times, but also during the times of celebration. We come together. And when we created those treaties, they became a sacred covenant. They weren't treaties of a transactional contract. It goes far beyond that. It's a sacred commitment like you would have with the ones that you love, the ones who are close to you. It's that sacred. So when we remember that 2-row wampum, in doing my genealogical research, I found that I think he's my 12th or 13th great-grandfather. His name was Garakonte. He also had a Christian name that he took, Daniel Garakonte. And so after the Dutch were pushed out, then the British were there. And so the Haudenosaunee said, well, we should go back to the British now and bring them this 2-row wampum and remind them what it means, and create a new relationship with these new people. So they brought the 2-row wampum again, but this time they said, what we need to ensure that our 2 great vessels don't outpace each other and that we don't get into each other's boat and try to steer it, but we shall be linked by 3 links, tied together by 3 principles: peace, friendship, and understanding, and respect. And they said, but we won't use rope that ties our ships together. We won't use iron chains, but we will use silver chains. So that treaty became known as the Silver Covenant Treaty. Because the reason why they chose silver was because silver tarnishes over time. And what the commitment is that we have to sit down together and polish those links until they sparkle again. That's an act of renewal. It's renewing the relationship with each other. And it's a deeper form of relationship. So when they took the Silver Covenant chain 100 years later, almost 100 years later, 1764, to what was called the Council of Niagara, the then Governor Johnson presented the Royal Proclamation that was written in 1763, just the year before. And so he wanted to read to the Indigenous leaders, and there were over 2,200 Indigenous leaders from many different nations around the Great Lakes, Ontario, Quebec, and some from Manitoba and the Plains. They came. And the treaty that they came away with from the Council of Niagara was called the Silver Covenant Chain. They renewed it again. And fast forward 350 years later, the Queen returns and gifts the symbolic silver bells to honor that treaty once again. So within that are lessons for us to remind ourselves as Canadians that the foundation of what we're doing is about family, that we are kins, and we have to take that really seriously, because the golden rule of that is that you do not make war on your family. You stand with them through the difficult times. And if we're not careful, these difficult times can present themselves again to us. So when we run into difficulties, we should be sitting down and gathering as we are now and talking about what we can do to make the future a little bit better. And what keeps us and relationships in order is ceremonies. And within our traditions, as you saw our Elder Gilman Cardinal doing the ceremony to open this up, to open it up in that good way, and to reconnect us with our spirits and reconnect us with our hearts, but also reconnect us as family. And so ceremony brings that balance. And because we're human beings, we have a tendency of taking way too much, getting violent, destructive, these sorts of things. But ceremonies were created when we get out of order like that to get back into order. So if we have family relationship issues, then we have ceremonies. And in our traditions, there's a ceremony for everything. Because balance is what we're really trying to get back into. So it helps us when we come together with intent, when we want to focus on things to get things done. We don't only sit here. What the ceremony does is that it creates a sphere of creativity. And around that sphere, as we sit here, your ancestors gather around it. And they are encouraging you during these important discussions. And they're inspiring you. And then when we have that sacredness done that way, and the ancestors have gathered, then we believe that the Creator comes and sits and listens to what we have to say and what it is that we wish to see in the future. So it's a very powerful thing. So ceremonies, while they can be taken as religious or whatever you want to call it, they're really a healing process as well. But also it's a way to celebrate with each other. And so what we need to do as Canadians is normalize that ceremonial process in honoring our relationships, creating more public discourse, strengthening interpersonal relations, and of course, community to community bridge building is really important for that. We have to be always in a consistent movement to keep moving these principles and values forward. And then in that way, we can see reconciliation as a ceremony, because it's a way in which we will sit as family to address the issues that are important. And when I think about the newcomers, I think of those treaties, and I think of the intent of what those treaties were. And we still have that value here. And we have a word in Cree called tatawao, which means welcome, there is room. Because within the tradition of the teaching of the circle, there's always room in the circle for one more. Because we look at it as coming from a perspective of abundance and that we do have a lot to share and a lot to offer with each other. It's about sharing, caring, and helping each other in order to move forward, and supporting identities. You are not required to leave behind your ancestors or the songs and ceremonies that they did to belong here. Actually, you will be bringing those gifts to strengthen the great circle that we call Canada. So there's lots of gifts there for us to have. And so when I think about reconciliation, thinking about it as a ceremony and also as a verb, you hear it said every now and again, reconciliation. So let's think about what it is, because we are what we do. And so we need to keep moving in that relationship aspect, in that movement sort of sense. And so when it comes to practicalities of how or what we're going to do, or what can you do to affect, improve, and strengthen reconciliation efforts and reconciliation itself. First thing that comes to my mind is reconciliation through genealogy. Because about 40% of, I know for sure 40% of Quebecois have an Indigenous person in their family tree. And I'm coming across many people who are starting to discover that they have an Indigenous person in their family tree. So I say look for that person. If anything, if you do any basic genealogy and you go back, let's say 5 generations, you will really start to understand yourself a lot more, and you'll uncover a lot of hidden secrets within the family, which is always a lot of fun. But, you know, and if you find an Indigenous person in your family, then I say, well, understand what nation they came from. Understand what was their life like during that time. Understand what were the issues that were pressing them. And so through that, we really get a deeper relation, because then your perspective of looking at Indigenous people begins to shift as well. And then we start to see each other again as family. You know, there's many recommendations I can make. Of course, understanding issues, getting a deeper understanding it, particularly from Indigenous perspectives. And now we have a lot of really well-versed and powerful speakers that are on the internet and in various forums and social media that are really bringing forward some wonderful ideas. And of course, supporting that Indigenous voice is really important for us as well, both artistic voices and also political voices as well, because they're all equal and they need the support. I always encourage people to volunteer for Indigenous organizations, because our organizations are generally underfunded and understaffed, so we can always use some help that way. And of course, attending Indigenous events and activities, because one thing that I've learned about community work is that the community needs to see you there. If there's anything that we appreciate more, is knowing someone is showing up to stand with us again in celebration, stand with us together in raising our voice to address the injustices that we do see. So when you look at it through the lens of your community, there's also things that we can do as collectively. And there's many resources on the internet to do wonderful ideas that can happen. But really, engagement, showing up, speaking with your heart, knowing your family story and your histories is an important part of that reconciliation, because reconciliation isn't just going to fix the relationship between the Indigenous peoples and Canadians. It's going to fix the relationships within your own families and your own communities as well. So thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Wow, thank you guys so much. Before I really officially thank you, though, we do have a few minutes for questions, so I'll kind of direct traffic, and I open up the floor to questions. It might take a minute, because both incredibly powerful, you both extremely good storytellers. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Do you want to come to the mic? I don't know. Oh, he's got, thank you.
Oh,
Awesome.
I just had a question for Lewis. Did you say that your family name came from Scotland? Then?
No, Spain.
Oh, Spain. But you're not Spanish in any way, right? Okay.
It's a Sephardic name, the Jewish name.
So was that name given to you by settlers then?
The first cardinal that came over in 1659 was Simon Jean Cardinal. And then his children started working in the fur trade, and then they started to marry profusely. They started to marry. Hear me?
Yep.
Oh. And so they started to marry into indigenous families as a part of the fur trade. And so that's how the name started to proliferate. Is that so the name comes directly from that first settler, Jean Simon Cardinal. And we can trace the lineages through the whole
Yeah,
thing,
because I have some friends with the last name Cardinal,
Yeah.
but I don't know if this is the right word. I thought that they were pure indigenous. I don't know if that's.
Well, genetics shows us that, there is no purity in any racial line, if we want to call it that. There isn't any. There's always an overlap with one nation or another. And so, the purity thing is something that is not true. It's not accurate.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Brandy, can you run it to Brandy? Oh, yes, thank you.
I really want to say thank you to both of you. I was going to say hi earlier, but I feel kind of shy. I'm actually a Métis person, and my family, I think we might be cousins because they're Borks, but I know there's lots of Cardinals up north. And actually, my mom is a genealogy buff, and she said that that line was this lady who came over of the Scotsman who's very rich and worked for Hudson's Bay Company, and she ended up leaving him for an indigenous man. So, woo! But I actually wanted to ask about the interfaith thing. Is that ecumenistic? I know there used to be an
Ecumenical?
Thank you. That's a mouthful. Yeah.
Well, the Edmonton Interfaith Network Society here in Edmonton is the largest interfaith group in Canada, for sure, and a very powerful group. And so it brings together all kinds of different faiths, religions, and spiritual traditions. And so we sit together and we talk about how we can do some education, how we can share in some common projects or initiatives to support the community in a broader way. With the Parliament of World Religions, it's also a very large organization. We convene every 3 to 4 years, bring together about 8,000 to 12,000 spiritual faith and religious leaders into one location, and we talk about the issues of the day. This August is when they're convening their 9th Parliament, and the theme is defending human rights and freedom. So we're bringing all these spiritual faith and religious leaders into one place, and my job is to bring in Indigenous spiritual leaders to come and participate in those dialogues as well. Because for a long time, the voices simply weren't there, but now we've created that space for them to share their wisdom with that global forum.
Chris?
Thank you both first for joining us, sharing your wisdom and your teachings with us, and for your continued leadership to our community here in Edmonton and beyond. I think now is a time where we're looking for more leadership than ever across our communities. I'm just wondering about what you've been talking about in reconciliation and the Pope's visit. I know for some that was very divisive in the community, and if you see that as an important way forward through reconciliation, just some thoughts on that.
Sure. Is it on? Yeah, it's on. So, yeah, it is divisive. There are people on both sides firmly, and then there are people who are, like to Lewis's metaphor, crossing the bridge and seeing what's on the other side. We were an organization that really tried to support people who really wanted to be there. And so that was the role that we played. I myself chose not to be there. because I really wanted it to be a space for elders and seniors who were impacted by that time and also are very devoutly Catholic now. So that was the role I played. But one of the reasons I think it was important is because, oh my gosh, I'm getting forgetful. Is because, I know the words are there. Oh, yes. So the day that they made the announcement that the Pope was coming, I was going to go to the Bissell Center and talk up a coat drive because it was November, and they just got news over the wire that this big announcement was coming, and so they asked me to pivot the news. And how I pivoted that day was just like a day or two before, they were doing some inquiry. They're always doing some kind of inquiry with the federal government. And Jean Chrétien went on the record as saying when he was Minister of Indian Affairs, he had no idea about residential schools and what happened there. And he's the Minister of Indian Affairs, that's what it was called when he was the minister. And so he said this to Canada. And what I said on the news that day was, he was the Prime Minister. He was the Minister of Indian Affairs, then he became a Prime Minister. And no longer can a leader of our country say that. If the Pope is going to come here and say, it happened, it shouldn't have happened, and we're sorry, right? So Jean Chrétien is a liar. He's been proven to be a liar by the Pope, who is the head of one of the churches that was involved in this time in our history. So never more can a politician go up and say, they didn't know, because now they know. So that's, for me, what I think is important about it. Then there's other things that are to follow. They talked about the doctrine of discovery and repealing that, or there was some other word they used, which Louis probably knows. Yeah, yes, I knew he would know. All those big words. But they're all steps, right? They're all steps in that direction. So that's what I'll say. I'll hand it over to Louis.
Yeah, it was a bittersweet experience for me as well. I'm not a Christian, but I grew up with a grandmother and a mother that were very staunch Catholics. So out of respect to them, I went to the Mass, and I wore a beaded jacket that my grandmother made in 1972, and I wore it there for her and for my mother. And so I thought that at least he was here to acknowledge these things that had happened. My mother was traumatized in residential school. And when she tried to broach the subject with her therapists and her doctors, they did not believe her. And that was a very painful thing to witness and to be there in that way. Of course, you get all kinds of feelings. You get a lot of anger and frustration and those sorts of things. But you have a choice of holding on to them or letting them go. So when I left, I did ceremony in order to bring it back to what really needs to be done. But with the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, which is a half step forward, they need to rescind it, and that's a different conversation altogether. A lot of legal implications with that. But at least they said, it was a bad idea, and we feel pretty lousy about it. So I'll take that for now, but keep encouraging them to dig a bit deeper and to really address those deeper issues.
Thank you both. Time for one more question. Anyone have a question? Okay. Thank you both so very much for sharing your time with us. I just feel really strongly that our reconciliation is in good hands with you guiding us. I've always learned from both of you that it's not one side or the other, that we need to come together, that we have to live and walk in two worlds together and walk alongside each other. So it just gives me such great hope, the things you said. Cheryl, I don't think I'll ever forget that story of the bird feeder. It will resonate with me, or someone who could have been my dad in the emergency room as well. But I really honor that. And Louis, I really learned today from you just about the importance of genealogy, and I think it's something I learned in my own life, like to dig back and learn from where we came, and I think it's so important for Indigenous culture and history too. So thank you both from the bottom of my heart for being here and for helping us. Will you come up for a second and let me give you a small gift? Cheryl, I also just wanted to comment on your absolutely beautiful ribbon skirt. It's breathtaking. I didn't even get to say that, even though I spent all day with you today. And Cheryl gifted me with a beautiful ribbon skirt, too, that I will always treasure forever. So thank you very much for that. Before I turn it over to you to end the AGM, could I just say a huge thank you to the team at REACH who made this AGM possible. So first and foremost, the most incredible assistant or office manager that anybody has ever had, and that's Christy Parker. She's even when I'm sitting here, she's sending me notes of reminder to make sure I don't screw it up. Andrew had quite a few too, I think, notes from Christy along the way. So thank you for that. Marilyn, I want to thank you for working with and getting both Cheryl and Louis here today, and for organizing the lunch that we could talk about it before. That's huge. And for those of you who don't know, in an act, I think, of reconciliation, our wonderful Marilyn is currently studying Cree, and actually the other day was able to do a land acknowledgement in Cree for the leadership team, for the whole staff, which she did very, very well. Andrew would put you and me to shame when we come to it. Also, as always, where's our ever-ready bunny, Kelly, who's always here to help us with that? She probably ran out just as I was going to acknowledge her. No, there you are. Hi, Kelly. Thank you for everything. And the wonderful Jill, thank you, too, for helping with everything.
Thank you to you both. Just a couple of quick reactions before I call the meeting to a close. Louis, you've given me a mission now, because my family is all from northeastern New Brunswick, Mi'kmaq territory. And my uncle is a genealogy buff. And he's written the history of that entire region and every family that has lived in that region. And if you take my family, you could draw a circle about a 5-10 kilometer radius, and you'd capture my grandparents, my great-grandparents, their grandparents, etc., on both my mother's side and my father's side. But there's something that doesn't exist in my uncle's book tracing that whole heritage, and it's the family name Leach. It appears out of nowhere. And the question has always been in our family, why? From where? And so you've given me another mission to try to answer that question. The other thing I took away, and I want to leave you with this, is that question of not just how far we have to go, but how far we've come. And I get the privilege to work at the University of Alberta and spend a lot of time with some very inspirational students. But this year is the 100th anniversary of the Faculty of Law at the University of Alberta, where I have a split appointment. And our valedictorian this year is a woman named Casey Keynes. And Casey's an Indigenous woman. And she, at the graduation address, she stood up and she said, you know, I want to reflect on this, and I'll get her words wrong, and she'd say them better than me. But she said, you know, 100 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to be here, either as a woman or as an Indigenous person. And her story doesn't end there. She's now finishing, as I said, as valedictorian, and she's off to clerk at the Supreme Court of Canada under Canada's first Indigenous justice at the Supreme Court. So take a second, take a click onto the Faculty of Law's website and read a little bit about her story, because it tells you, and when she tells it obviously way better than I do, but it gives you a sense of that, how far we have come, also how much further we have to go. But thank you very much for both of you for sharing that, and to all of you for indulging me in my little ramble here. And so with that, I think the only task remaining to me is to officially call for an adjournment of this meeting. And I do not think we need a motion to do that. And so I am just going to thank you all for your time and thank Jan for another great year of Reach. So we are, as board members, I'm going to remind you that we have a little gathering to renominate Adel as treasurer. No, just kidding. And Jan, do you have?
Yeah, just to say,
Oh,
we're
okay.
going right after this, we're going to the fourth floor to do that.
Okay, so board members, we're going up to the fourth floor, and to all of you, thank you for joining us today.
And lastly, Chris, please feel free to stay and mingle. I just need to grab the board members to new and, I don't want to say old, but new and currently serving. So, and please stay and mingle. The bar will remain open and there's still some snacks. So thanks very much, everyone.